the silica cooled and hardened, it became quartz. So that's what the miners were looking for underground. Feel free to come up and have a closer look. There's a little bit more gold behind this perspex right here as well. Now if you look on the rock and you see a lot of this yellow powdery stuff, yeah, that's not gold. Now iron pyrite, fool's gold, is made up of mainly two things, plus a little bit of gold in there. It is iron and sulfur. So when the iron pyrite breaks down, you get a lot of this yellow powdery stuff, which is sulfur. Now the problem with sulfur is that when you mix it with water and it remains stagnant, so that water remains still for a very long time, it starts to smell bad, real bad. It smells like rotten eggs, which unfortunately means Bendigo has our local smell, and that smell is rotten eggs. So if you go for a walk in Roslyn Park along the Bendigo Creek and you get a real strong whiff of rotten egg, you can't blame the bats. It's not the bats. It's telling you that you are walking over an old mine shaft, and you are. There used to be a mine right smack bang in the centre of town. And it's just the water underneath and the sulphur in that water rising up, and that's what you smell. So as much as the bats, I love the bats though. I'm like the only person in Bendigo who loves the bats. But you can't blame the bats. It's not the bats. It's that. Anyway. Don't spend a lot of time going down there and testing the rocks. So it's anywhere that we don't regularly test, that's why it's all can't go down. I'm talking about the holes in the moment, but yeah. Now, before we move on to our next display, I'm going to give you all a history lesson on the Central Deborah Gold Mine. Now, if you came on this tour thinking it's Bendigo's #1 tourist attraction, according to TripAdvisor, which must have meant that this was a fairly successful gold mine back in the day, well, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but no, it wasn't. The Central Deborah Gold Mine was fairly unsuccessful. It did run for 15 years though, from 1939 until 1954, but in that 15 years they found just under 1 tonne of gold here, 929 kilograms. Now that might seem like a lot, but that's over 15 years that they found that much, and gold is 19 times heavier or more dense than water. So if you melt 929 kilograms of gold down, you end up with a cube this big. That is 1 tonne of gold. It fits very nicely into a milk crate. Now to get that 1 tonne of gold, they had to mine out 60,000 tonnes of quartz from this mine. And to get to that quartz, the miners had to mine out 40,000 tonnes of grey rock to get that much gold in 15 years. That's not much, is it? Now, that gold needed to cover the costs of mining. It needs to pay the miners' wages. It needs to fix the broken down equipment. It needs to buy the new equipment on the market that makes everything easier. But it needs to please the investors and the stakeholders that are sinking lots of money into these mines, keeping them operational until they were self-sufficient. And the only way you became a self-sufficient gold mine was by finding lots of gold. And when that happened, those stakeholders were making a profit. That didn't really happen here. They lost a lot of investors. Then they were able to con some more in into giving them money, but then they left too. And then they were able to con some more into it, and then they left too. By 1954, all of the investors said, nope, we're gone. We're not getting anything out of this mine. So they closed their doors because they didn't have any money to pay the miners' wages. And when you don't have miners, you don't have a mine. So 54, they closed their doors here. But when they did that, when they closed their doors, they did something that was very unusual for a gold mine back in the day. They left everything to gather dust. Usually when a gold mine closes down, they'll move the poppet head to another site. They will sell off all the machinery up on the surface. And all that's left of the mine site is a hole in the ground where the mine shaft is. And what they used to do back then is they would put a sheet of corrugated iron over the top of that hole for safety. children back in the day used to use as a trampoline. I kid you not, my dad was one of those kids. I am so lucky to be here. But they didn't do that at this site. As I said, they just left everything. So it meant in the 1970s, when the Bendigo Trust, now Bendigo Heritage, we came through looking for a potential site to do up, all we had to do is dust off the old machinery up on the surface, make sure underground was safe to go adventuring under, and what once was a fairly unsuccessful gold mine here in Bendigo is now our #1 tourist attraction, making far more money now than it ever did as a working gold mine. Now, we found that gold down there when we were making the tunnels bigger for big groups. So the miners completely missed that. A lot of people ask us why we don't mine that out ourselves. I mean, we could, but for the longest time, we had no idea what was behind that display. There could have been more gold, but there's no X-ray machine to show us if there's anything behind there. They haven't invented that yet. Hopefully they will one day. So, it wasn't until the late 1980s that a group of miners volunteered their time and dug a tunnel down here, up and behind that display. That display down there is a 2-metre thick wall of rock. Behind it is a huge cavern where they dug out all the quartz. Now, digging out all the quartz from an area is called stoping, and that's why you might get tiny, tiny tunnels and then huge open caverns. Tiny, tiny tunnels, huge open caverns. Those open caverns that you might see underground, that's where all the quartz was. And you would mine out all the quartz, because what could possibly be in quartz? Gold. Now, when they stoped out that area, they didn't find much. So the decision was made to keep that wall there, so we had something to show you all as you came through, which I think was a brilliant idea. So that's the very, very brief history of the Central Deborah Gold Mine, and now you are a part of that history, so well done. Come with me down this way. I'm going to show you my second favourite display. Yes. You can keep that. Alright, we're going to form a semicircle, starting from over there, up against the rock. Now, the only place I ask no one to stand is in front of this rock right here, because I'm about to hit it to the bar. Come on down a bit. Come on down. Now, I do have to do a head count right now, so we're going to so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 19, 20. Fantastic. I have never, ever lost anyone on a tour, okay? Just so you know. Very, very good. Now, the rock underneath Bendigo, all of this rock surrounding you right now, is incredibly hard. On average, it's about 7 times harder than concrete. And concrete is pretty hard. Now, it's not a case of getting there with a pickaxe and chipping your way through. The rock is too hard for that. I mean, listen to this. I'm about to make a little bit of noise here so you know just how hard this rock is. All right? We're all good? Yeah, you're going to be there for a very long time trying to chip through with a pickaxe. In a hard rock mine, what the miners had to do is they had to drill holes into the rock. They had to pack those holes full of explosives. And kaboom! They had to blast the rock apart. Now, in the early days of mining, before rock drills were invented, the miners had to do this the hard way. It's called the hammer and tap method. You have a chisel-ended metal bar, and you have a sledgehammer. You'd put the sharp end of the bar against the rock, and you would go tap, twist, tap, twist, tap, and you would chisel a hole. Now, the hole needed to be about 1 metre deep before you packed it with explosives, and doing it this way took one miner 4 hours to drill one hole. You needed to drill a pattern of holes, sometimes 20 of them, before you could blast your way through. So we're not talking hours of work before you got anywhere, we're talking days. Now, one miner could do this, but usually you had a team of miners. One would hold the bar, then maybe one or two had sledgehammers. It was faster this way, but this was the technique that the miners were using when they still only had the light of a candle. So not a lot of light to see by. And the miners were doing this for hours every day. They were getting tired. I always felt so sorry for the poor miners whose job it was to hold the bar, because accidents happened and every now and then they'd miss with the sledgehammer, and guess what they got instead? Whack! They'd hit the fingers of the poor guy holding it instead. Broken fingers were fairly common. Stupid. Now, in the 1870s in Germany, this drill right here was invented. This is the reciprocator rock drill. It is a mechanical version of the hammer and tap. So you've got one miner who pushed and pulled that lever, that forced the drill steel in and out of the rock. And then you had another miner who would twist it between each turn, and that would chisel the hole. Now this drill could drill a 1 meter deep hole in 40 minutes, which is much faster than 4 hours. But there was a massive problem with this machine. As it chipped away at the rock, it created clouds of dust. This dust has a natural form of glass in it. It's called crystalline silica. The miners were now breathing in tiny particles of glass, and it was shredding their lungs. They developed a lung disease called silicosis, or miner's complaint. So the miners who use this machine right here very rarely lived past the age of 40. Now, sad but true story, my great-grandfather was a miner here in Bendigo. In the early years of his mining career, he used the reciprocator rock drill because it was the only drill available to him at the time. My great-grandfather passed away from silicosis at the age of 34. I'm 38, so it really puts things into perspective for me. I still consider myself to be quite young, and he was younger than me when he passed away. And because of its tragic history, the miners who used this machine gave it a nickname. This is the Widowmaker. But they knew that that machine caused problems, so they did invent something much better to replace it with. By the 1920s, the miners here in Bendigo were using the drifter rock drill. It's what they used here at this mine, and its advantage over the reciprocator was really quite simple. It was a hose. This hose pumps water through a hollow drill steel. So instead of having clouds of dust coming out of the hole that the miners were breathing in, making them sick, they had a mud or a sludge that poured out and onto the ground. It was far safer to use this machine. They weren't breathing in as much silica anymore. Now this was also a faster drill yet again. It could drill a 1.5 meter deep hole in 20 minutes. This is also the one that I switch on to show you just how loud it could get. But because it is very loud, I do ask that everyone sticks their fingers in their ears. I want to see earwax on your fingers when you pull them out, okay? I mean, no, that's gross. Now, I can't stick my fingers in my ears and use this machine at the same time. That's why I get these, okay? Loud, isn't it? Oh, it's a little loud. I was waiting for someone to do that. Now, I have a very, very important question for you all. Do you think the miners who use this machine for about 3 hours every shift wore ear protection? No, they didn't. So they were going home at the end of their shift. Well, not quite just yet, but the end of their shift. You ever listen to really loud music with headphones on, really, really loud, taking it off and you get ringing in your ears? That's what they were going home with. Intense ringing in their ears. But by the end of their mining careers, they were lucky if they had any hearing left, which is, again, really sad. Now I have two more displays to show you. Come down this way. Welcome back to puddle territory. Unfortunately, I can't control the water. Feel free to come on down a little bit. What I show you is right in the middle. So make sure you can see what's behind me, as in directly behind me.
The mini miners.
Alright, we'll make it work. It's all good. Okay, now there is a little bit of science involved when it comes to blasting through the rock. It's not a case of getting there with your rock drill and drilling holes wherever you want to. There are patterns that the miners have to follow. Now the important thing to stop and consider when you are blasting through rock is the direction that that rock is going to blast towards. The last place you want that rock to go is into that tunnel. Because if the rock blasted into the tunnel, it could damage the timber sets. It could damage the equipment, but more importantly, that rock could damage the miners. Because the miners were underground while everything went kaboom. And I'll explain why in just a moment. Now you're probably wondering though, well if the rock doesn't explode out to the tunnel, where else is there for that rock to go? Good question. It's where the patterns came in very handy. I'm going to talk about this one in the centre here. It's called the burn cut. The first thing the miners did is they drilled a big hole in the middle of where they wanted their tunnel to go. No explosives in this big hole. It's left hollow. They would then drill smaller holes out and around, up and down until it was the height and the width of the tunnel that they wanted. Now those smaller holes were packed full of explosives. They had to go off in a particular sequence. They couldn't all go off at the same time. That would be a very, very messy blast. So the first holes to go boom were the ones closest to this hole in the middle. This was a weakness point. So these will go boom, fracturing the rock and forcing it into the centre. So kaboom, not boom, out into the tunnel. Then the next closest went off, same thing, fracturing the rock, forcing it into the centre, boom. And they'll all get bigger, boom, and bigger, boom, boom. All the rock stayed here. Very rarely did it go out there. Now I'm going to show you the sequence that it went off in by pushing a button. When I push this button, nothing actually explodes. It is a light, it's like, it is a light and sound show. There are flashing lights though, so if you're someone who can't cope with flashing lights, when I do the countdown, please cover your eyes. This is timed fairly accurately though. It was set up by my mentor Ken, who was a demolitions expert. It was his job to teach other miners how to set the explosives. So this is as close to accurate as he could get it. I'll count us down so you know it's about to happen, but to get a good idea, you need to come in a bit closer. So come on, mini miners to the front. Come on in. Remember, it doesn't actually explode, so you're okay. All right, I'll count us down. 3, 2, 1. Now, the explosives that they used were sticks of gelignite. They'd put about 3 or 4 of these into each of the holes, except for the one in the middle. Remember, that's hollow. The stick of gelignite at the end had the detonator attached to it. That's what made the sticks of gelignite go kaboom. And attached to the detonator was your fuse wire. It, along with the detonator, went in just like that. Now, lighting the other end of the fuse wire was the very last thing the miners did at the end of their shift. They lit the fuses and made their way very calmly back to their cages where they waited to go up to the surface and go home. But, as I said before, they were all underground while everything went kaboom, because they had to count all the booms. In our case, there were 12 booms, and I counted each and every time, even though it's a recording and I know it's never going to change. Because if this was for real, and we only heard 11 booms, it meant that there could be some unexploded gelignite sticks amongst all of the rock. And if that were the case, we had to tell the next crew that were coming down to dig out the rock to be very careful. Because if they were not careful and they started digging, cha-ching, and, well, not quite cha-ching, let's go kaboom. The shovel hit if the shovel hit a stick of gelignite, it would explode whilst they were on top of it. You weren't likely to survive that. Scary stuff. So I have one more display to show you just down this way. Word of warning for all you tall people. It is the lowest part of the tunnel, so please watch your heads. Yeah. The way out. Okay. All right. Now with me here, I have 2 different tools that the miners who work the different mines in Bendigo, so not just this one, the 2 different tools that they use. I'll show you in a moment. 2 different tools that they use to dig up the rock and fill up the mine trucks underground. I have this absolutely amazing machine behind me, the rocker shovel, and I have an actual shovel. Now, remembering that this was not a very successful gold mine, they didn't have a lot of money to spend on fancy equipment. Which tool do you think they used here? The shovel. They did everything the hard way here. Now, using a shovel, it took a miner about 12 minutes to fill up that mine truck right to the top. When that was chock-a-block full, it weighed half a ton. You would then have to push that, sometimes 500 meters, back to the shaft where it went up to the surface and all the rock was sorted. When it was empty, came back down here, pushed it here, filled it up again, pushed it back there, and up to the surface, came back down, push it back here, fill it up again, push it back here, there and back again, 30 to 35 times a shift. The miners were incredibly fit. Now, in those lucky mines making lots of money, they might have had one of these, a rocker shovel. We also call this a rail bogger here in Australia. Now, using the rocker shovel, it took a miner 2, maybe 3 minutes to fill up that truck, and the miners weren't getting really tired, constantly digging up the rock, because the machine did it for you. Now, unfortunately, I can't switch this machine on to show you how it works, because it's broken. And when things break down here at the Central Deborah Gold Mine, it's not an easy fix. They don't make machines like this anymore. You've got newer styles on the market, but they don't use the same parts. So we can't just go on eBay and buy a new part. We need to find someone who can make a part from scratch. And we've got to fit it, and we've got to test the machine, and it takes forever to get things fixed up here. So, that being said though, I am going to demonstrate how this machine was used. I'm going to make the noises myself. So, we have 2 levers here. This lever controls the rocker shovel forwards and backwards along this track. And this one controls the bucket. We scoop the rock up over into the mine truck and back down again. So it goes a little bit like this. The first thing you want to do is you want to go forwards to scoop up the rock. So you go. You want to scoop up the rock. You want to go backwards. You want to dump the rock in the mine truck. Bang! Crash. You want to go forwards again. You want to scoop up the rock. You want to go backwards. You want to dump it all. Bang! Crash. And so on and so forth. I am the only tour guide that does that. So you're very lucky. Okay. And no one else sort of embarrasses themselves that way. Anyway, well, that's the end of the tour underground. I'm about to take you down here and around the corner back to the lift that you can currently hear coming down. So follow me. Yeah, that low rumble is the lift.
Yeah. Go back to the lift and go back up. And you said the noise you could hear is the lift coming down. Oh, it's raining on you. At least you know when it is. Very cool. Very funny. Yeah, it's like... Yeah. And fix it. Take it north and just hold me there on Minecraft. You go out there.
Wow. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. See, I told you I didn't lose anyone.
I just magically disappear.
Okay, now when I push the go button this time, it does not start with a jump. But it finishes with one though. I'll warn you when that is. Alright, we'll head up on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. What I'm going to get everyone to do now, if you haven't already done so, is turn your paddlets off. Now there are 3 settings, so sometimes when you think it's off, it's not off just